Where to go. So we're back in the field with Leon Martin for his discussion on farming, and we're going to start talking about some of the hidden costs in farming, especially costs and impositions caused by government and local body. And we're going to talk about what's it like in Australia when it comes to these sort of problems.
Yeah, well, in terms of what we would term paperwork or bureaucracy for farming in Australia, water is probably one of the major issues just at this point in time. And in terms of where it's headed, of course, we have two tiers of government, being state and federal, and they're both actually having their little tug-of-war over who's actually going to control it. At this stage in time, the federal government in Australia has announced that they're actually going to buy back water from the Murray-Darling system, which is the Murray River and the Darling River that take a very large volume of water through the southeastern part of Australia and out to sea in what we call South Australia. And the implications are, at this stage, that in fact that water will be bought by government or local government for urban and or industrial use.
Okay.
So they will pay more for it than what we can in farming, or afford to in farming. So my vision is that in reality it will take most of the water that's used in irrigated agriculture.
Will go to feed the water people.
Yeah. So
But
in fact they will have to go back to dryland farming in that context, because of the need to plan, etc., etc. So you can't plan without water.
Is there substantial wastage in the way you water in Australia? Is there room to improve your use of the resource?
The suggestion is there is, but a lot of it, in theory, is in the delivery of the water. We've made really massive gains in terms of water use efficiency with the various crops. We've changed the pasture types, we've changed crop types, we've changed the actual irrigation systems to use water really efficiently, and we've made huge progress in the last 5 years since the drought in 2002.
Yeah.
And so if you said, is there room to improve? There is, but there's not any massive margins that we can afford with major capital expenditure.
And this is going to affect what type of farming? Not so much grain, or mainly the lucerne and the alfalfa?
Well, you're a horticultural, so right through
the grapes,
from vegetables through to fruit, flour, and then you come back through, and of course grapes has been a big industry.
And dairy farming, obviously another big user of water.
Water, yes.
In Australia.
But a lot of the irrigated dairying is already gone from that area.
Is it?
It's already been packed up and moved.
And what have they done with the dairy farms?
Basically sold off as, many of them were smaller farms, so they've been sold as lifestyle farms.
So the dairies are just gone?
Sold the water right off through the open market, and then sold the farm off to someone who wants to live in a local town and go to town to business.
And what happens to those dairy farms being established somewhere else in Australia?
Some of the cows have actually gone through to the southern part of Victoria and into Tasmania. The rest have been killed.
Incredible.
So, to quote statistics, in the last, let's say 6 or 7 years, since 2001-02, we had what we call deregulation of milk supply. So the various states meant that if I produced milk in New South Wales, I couldn't actually sell it to a company in another state.
Yeah.
So with deregulation, they took away those boundaries, which meant that milk could be moved
it started flowing
and sold. And at that point in time, we had approximately 39,000 dairy farmers throughout Australia.
Wow.
At this stage in time, we would be lucky to have somewhere between 5 and 10,000.
But bigger farms? Your milk production's gone...
on average, but the number of people that have left the dairy industry nationally has gone from that to that.
Yeah. But your production's dropped substantially with your milk production, or was your milk production?
That's what's wrong at the moment, is the milk companies are having trouble picking up milk, and the distances between pickups is killing them.
And the cost of diesel is starting to really bite.
So there's a company at the moment called Dairy Farmers up the eastern coast, and I mean it's on the market, but effectively I would suggest that it's the cost of picking up milk for that company that's actually led it into insolvency. Yeah,
and so you're going to see you're looking at the grain in Australia. Every square acre is being planted in grain that can go in grain.
Effectively, a lot of dryland country people sold their livestock, so they didn't have to feed them, or there was no water for the stock, and so consequently, if you haven't got stock, the cost to buy in it, basically a lot of people have gone to, part-time cropping. They've gone to full-time cropping. Yeah. And this year, of course, they're hoping to obviously come out with a reasonable outcome. And
so you're going to see, expecting a substantial grain crop out of Australia?
Expecting is the word,
It's very optimistic in a lot of Australia. The crops are looking good.
At this stage in time, the weather pattern as such, it's not yielding. We're not getting the rainfall that we should. And so some people, where they've had small amounts of rain, have begun to sow on the expectation that they will
there will be enough.
A lot of people are still waiting for enough moisture to sow.
Because you of course plant most of your grain in the autumn.
Yes, autumn,
harvest in the
autumn,
spring.
Yeah, basically April, May, June.
To capture the rain.
July, into that, so it's a winter.
Winter crop. And then you're harvesting it in October, November, or?
Yeah, they begin harvesting, November through December into early January.
And so that dry patch, you've got nothing in the ground. There's no requirement for water.
Yeah,
in
effect,
after.
it can be in fallow phase, so to speak. Yeah.
Well,
So, that system works well when you've got enough moisture for the crop to actually germinate and survive.
So
we've had 2 failures now in a row.
Yeah.
And so, people are very gun shy because they lost their costs.
They lose their confidence.
Without any income.
Yeah.
And in some cases, people have been hedging with insurance, and of course, then had to pay out the insurance.
Yeah. Just awful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. It's great to catch up with what's happening in Australia. Thanks, Mins.